Runs and fills are a really useful way in filling out the music that you play so you can get more sound out of it. It sounds more flourishing. It just sounds better. Well, today I'm going to introduce you to what fills and runs are, as well as how to play them fast. So let's get on to our first topic. All right, so the first thing we're talking about is what runs and fills are. Well, from the introduction, you could probably tell that when I was playing Silent Night, I had some extra notes right about there, right? I kind of added that in, and it just kind of gave it an extra flourish. It helped fill the song in. So really what fills and runs are, they're often used interchangeably. A fill can really be any combination. A run is really a string of notes that goes along. But anyway, they are used to fill up the sound of a piece, and it can make them sound a bit better. All right, let's get on to the big number 2, actually, which is what you need to know first before you can start playing these. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the things you need to know to be able to play these fills. These include basic major and minor triads. Seventh chords are good to know, of course. So what I'm talking about are the 3-note chords, the major chords, the minor chords. Like that. I guess I shouldn't have played that succession. That sounded kind of weird, but they were all minor chords. But you want to learn your majors, minors, maybe even diminished and augmented. I'll try to remember to put a link in the description so you can learn more about these chords. If you are unfamiliar with them, the better you can be at your chords, the better you will be at fills, because a lot of what you do when you fill is you're playing chords and arpeggios and things like that. So the first thing you really want to do is get your chords down. Let's talk about the second thing that I think you should be practicing, which of course is what chord tones are. So quite simply, and I can explain this now actually, this is pretty easy. All a chord tone is a note that belongs in a chord. So if I have a C major chord down here in my left hand, maybe the notes C, E, and G, well, when I'm playing notes up here, these are the chord tones, C, E, or G. Any other note is a non-chord tone. So we're mostly going to be using chord tones. However, we can make things a little bit more interesting by experimenting with a few non-chord tones, which we'll talk about a little later in the lesson. All right, you also need some basic knowledge of your key signatures. Now, this isn't 100% necessary. However, it really helps, because if you're playing in different pieces and you're playing different chords and things like that, you're going to know what sharps or flats fit into that piece, fit into the chord, and fit into the key. You don't want to be playing non-diatonic notes that are outside of the key, at least too many of them, or it will just sound straight up terrible. All right, let's get on to the next thing. And then you also want to learn about, also, I want to mention that I will also put a link in the description for those key signatures as well if you want to learn more about that. Extended chords for a more flavorful sound is another thing to learn. All I mean by extended chords, we have our triads, right? 3-note chord. And then if you extend one note over, that's called a 7th chord. 7th chord only has 4 notes, not 7. 7 comes from the distance between the outer edges. So there's 7 notes between C and B right here. Well, if you continue on and keep adding notes like every other note, you have now, here's a 7th, then you have a 9th, a 11th, and a 13th. You can experiment around with these if you know what you're doing to get a more interesting sound out of your runs and your fills, because you'll just have more notes that you can go by. Okay, I already covered that. Here we go. I actually talked about all this already, kind of going through it. Here we go. Okay, so here's the fun part. We're going to perform our first simple run, and let's talk about how to do this. Well, the first thing you want to do is find out what key we're in. We're going to use Silent Night as an example. We happen to be in the key of G, meaning we have O1 sharp. The next thing you want to do is pick out the scale you will be using and pick 4 of the notes of that scale, 3 of them being chord tones. Okay, so here's what I mean by that in case you're confused. So if we're in G major, and scales is another thing, in addition to your key signatures that you should know, you know that in the key of G major, there's 1 sharp, F sharp right here. And by playing the scale first, you get an idea on the layout of the keys in that piece all in a row. So scales are really helpful for that. Now what I meant by pick 4 notes of the scale is you generally don't want to be playing the whole scale up as a run. I mean, you can do that. It just sounds, it might sound a little bit, let me try it. It actually didn't sound too bad if you play it like real fast. You have to play it real fast though. So you don't really want to be playing a whole scale. So what I would do is, so say we have a G major chord going on. The first thing I really want to mention first is that, hold on a second. Let me get this draw thing here so I can circle what we're talking about here. So where to put in the fills is what I forgot to mention earlier. So here's where you put in fills. You put in fills and runs whenever there's a rest or a longer note that's being held, because there's not really a lot going on there. It doesn't make any sense to put like a fill right there, right in the beginning, because we already have melody notes going on and it kind of conflicts. So what you want to do is you want to look out for extended notes, meaning notes that are longer than others, like these dotted half notes are perfect. Ooh, almost dropped the pen. These dotted half notes are perfect to add in some fills. So if you notice, we have the chord G here, and if you don't know anything about lead sheet, the G will actually take up the entirety of the first 4 measures until there's a new chord symbol there, just so you know. So whenever we put in our fill here with the B, we're going to be outlining a G major chord. And one of the easiest ways to do a fill really would be to just play the chord 1 note at a time. That's called an arpeggio. So when you put it all in context, just like that, and it sounds pretty good. It's very, very simple. I'm just using that G chord that I'm already playing with my left hand. Now you can add in another note, and what other note is up to you. I kind of always like, not always, but I like to use the A. That's actually our 9th in the chord. So instead of just playing G, B, D, I'll play G, A, B, D. And that gives it like a slightly dreamier kind of sound. You could also use the 13th, which would be the E with it. That also gives it another like little extra kind of spice. So it depends on like what kind of piece you're working on and the context of the piece. But when you're first learning how to do these, I would just stick with a simple arpeggio and then maybe add in just one of those extra notes there. So let's hear it with that extra note added in. See, it has like a very nice sound to it. Let's try it with the 6 added now. Now we're adding in the E instead of that A. See, it just gives it a different flavor. So experiment around with that. It's going to take a while before you get these to sound good. But you just, it's basically an improv technique, at least I think it is, to do these runs and fills, where you really have an idea in your mind of what you should be using, chords, scales, things like that. But in terms of what actually happens in the piece, you're kind of making it up on the spot. So just start out very simply, like when you first start to improvise, just stick to the basics, stick to those chord tones, and then stick to just the arpeggios. All right, let's move on here. Let's take a look. Okay, and then you want to play, I would play 4 notes up and down 2 octaves. You can actually just play them up like I did. So what I had written here was, you can actually go back down the other way. So I'm going to go up like I did before, but then I'm going to come back down. So let me try it all in context. Oops. Sorry. Just like that. So experiment around, see what you can come up with. You don't just have to go up. You can go up and come back down as well. All right, let's take a look at our next slide, which says you can play the notes in different orders. So this kind of goes along with what I just said, but I can elaborate on it a little bit more. So playing the notes in different orders. Obviously, you could play them coming down. You could do them all just coming down if you wanted. So like that has like a cool cascading kind of feel to it. So also think about like when you do the run, what kind of image or what kind of feeling is it conveying, and does it fit in with the piece that you're working on? Okay, and then in the other groupings, what I was really getting to here is that you don't have to just play them as a strict arpeggio, one note at a time. You can actually group the notes together kind of like this, just oversimplifying it. So instead of playing G, B, and D as an arpeggio, I could do like a waltz pattern where I play the bottom note and then the two top notes of the chord. So let's try that. So a very simple fill, but it's another thing that you can do. You can also kind of move your way up the keyboard and kind of grouping the different notes together in maybe two groups. So I have these four notes, G, A, B, and D is what I'm playing. So instead of just playing them all in a group, I could play A and D first, G and B, and then move up an octave, do the same thing. It has a very nice, gentle kind of sound to it. So let's see how I can get that to work in the piece. So here we go. How was that? Added a kind of a different kind of flair to it. You can be inventive. You could even play the notes out of order. Like that. Now, that didn't sound quite right. I would experiment it around a few times until I got it to fit well into the piece. Okay, there's just some examples of the different patterns you can do. There are a lot more out there that I'm sure you can come up with. If you come up with an awesome one, let me know in the comments so we can kind of share our ideas together, because I'm not the only one that learns from these, or you're not the only one that learns from these lessons. I learn from them too by looking at the comments and seeing some great people, some great students in our classroom chiming in. Okay, let's take a look at the next part, which of course is playing them in different groupings, which I kind of talked about. So I talked about different orders. I talked about different groupings like that, grouping them together. And then you can also play them in different rhythms. So this is where it can get interesting. So far I've just been playing them in triplets, at least with the straight arpeggio. And then with the extra note in there, I am doing 16th notes because it makes sense to fit 4 of those into each beat. But it doesn't need to be that way. You can add any kind of rhythm you want. So here we have in this piece, Silent Night, it begins with a dotted quarter eighth rhythm, which kind of has this like kind of lilting, kind of, I don't know, like horseback ride kind of feel to it. So when I do the run, I'm going to try to maybe keep on with that kind of feel and see if it fits the song a little bit better. So let's try that out. Something like that. So you can experiment around like that. That's the key word of the day, is experiment, and see how you do as well. And then somebody mentioned in the chat right now, which I kind of forgot to cover. I may have it in a slide, but I want to make sure I get it to it now so we don't forget. Chromaticism and playing a chromatic scale is useful for this as well. This gets a little tricky though, because if you kind of have to know what you're doing a little bit more with this one. Because with a chromatic scale, you're playing one note. You're basically playing up in half steps, also called semitones, and down like that. The problem with that is that it uses a lot of notes outside of the scale, so you're not going to really be able to go up too far. You're probably only going to be able to chromaticize some of the notes. So let me see if I can kind of figure this out. Sounds really weird. Hold on. So as you can see, it doesn't really fit the song. If I probably thought about it some more and really worked through it, I could probably get it to fit in certain places. But that's one you can also experiment around with, but it only works in certain cases. It probably works really well a lot in jazz, where you have a lot of extended chords, a lot of notes outside of the normal chords that you're working with. Okay, time for the main juicy part of the lesson. Actually, the main part, which was figuring out what these are, has passed, but I want to tell you now how you can learn how to play these fast, as promised in the description and the title. So, you're not going to like this part, or maybe you will. But the thing I have to tell you right now is that you have to practice and master your scales and chords, like I mentioned right in the beginning. And again, I'll try to make sure I provide a link in the description so you can learn about all of these things. I may even make a playlist just for this lesson. You also want to learn your major, a natural, and harmonic minor scales. So what this means is you want to learn all your major scales, going through the circle of fifths in the order of your sharps. And then you want to go through and learn your natural minor scales, which all a natural minor scale is basically starting a major scale on a different note. So if you have C major, its equivalent is A minor. And I'm just basically playing the C major scale starting on A. And that creates an A natural minor. Harmonic minor is when you take this next to last note, raise it up, make it a G sharp, a leading tone, back to there. It kind of gives it a different kind of flavor. You want to be familiar with both types of these, because these do appear and you can use the notes in these scales to do these runs also. Okay. All right, but I'm not going to get too much into scales right now, since this isn't really a scales lesson. The next thing I want to tell you is you want to get a metronome to get a run up to your speed that you want to get to. You gradually increase the speed after a few playthroughs. So a metronome is that thing that beeps and clicks so you can get online. Beep, boop, 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 boop. You may have seen it before. I have one right here. Unfortunately, it is out of batteries, but you can look one up online. You can just type in online metronome, and all a metronome does is helps keep the beat. And then you want to see if you can play your scales along with the metronome, and then you bump up the metronome a few points, since it's also used to increase your speed, and then see if you can do it there. And then if it falls apart on you and you can't do it, what should you do? You should slow it back down. You shouldn't, just keep plowing through that. So normal things to get your scales ready and your arpeggios and things like that. Arpeggios is another one I'm actually going to add that to the list right now. Arpeggios, here we go. Let's see. Okay, so there we go. We got chords and arpeggios, since they are really that important. So really going through and mastering your basics, your scales, your arpeggios, things like that. You also want to learn a little bit more about improvisation, filling in notes based on the scales and things. It's a very similar, it's actually pretty much the same technique as improv. You're just doing it, just filling it into a piece that already exists. So you want to really, really know all your stuff. And like I mentioned, Links are in the description for that. Okay, and if you really liked our lesson today and you're like, I just really want more of Tim's lessons and I really want to learn more than ever before, I want the complete experience. Well, you definitely want to head over to pianolessonsontheweb.com, where I have over 20 courses I've made. I'm actually in process of making some more right now, all designed to help you learn a lot more about piano and music. So whether you're a beginner starting out, you need a good review, a good solid foundation on that beginner stuff, or if you're an intermediate or advanced student and you're starting to outgrow the channel here and you're looking for more stuff we haven't covered yet, more stuff to just get you to that next level, well, you're definitely going to want to check out my website, pianolessonsontheweb.com. You can browse the courses by clicking music courses there, scrolling down. As you can see, there's a ton of piano courses. There's music theory, rhythm, improvisation, sight reading, ear training, and a lot of other things to really give you that complete music education experience online. One other thing I want to mention is during checkout, you can purchase courses individually or in packs. You can use the code YouTube during checkout to get an additional 15% off any order. And this even works on the course packs as well. Once you add them to your cart and you go to checkout, there'll be like a little thing that says add coupon code. You type in YouTube in there and it will give you 15% off any order. So I'll let you know about that, because if you like what you see over here on the channel, you're really going to like what you see over there on the website. To get the hang of doing these runs and fills, it is paramount, very, very important that you understand how to learn your chords. Or how to play your chords. Are you looking for a really fast method to learn your chords? Well, I'm going to put a link here, either in the description or some kind of pop-up for the lesson I recommend you watch next, which is how to learn all your chords super duper fast. So don't miss out that one. It has a lot of great tips in it.